different inflation problems that India has done remarkably well in terms of controlling inflation right through the pandemic and in the post-pandemic impact as well. And suddenly tomato prices go through the roof. Arhar, tur dal prices go through the roof. Food inflation, I mean, that's the one thing that's actually spoiling the entire efforts of India to keep inflation in controllable levels.
And my question really is, Krishna, that how much of food inflation or how much of oil inflation, and that is why core inflation strips off that data, how much of that can really be controlled by any sort of monetary tightening or loosening, as the case may be.
True.
So let's try and pull up the Thalinomics and see, what are the food prices that we are looking at.
Right.
And in fact, according to the same Deutsche Bank report that I was referring to, the three core products of tomatoes, of potatoes and onions have gone up as much as 87% month on month between the month of June and July. But let's just run through the data we have here, and this of course is on a year-to-year basis.
Right.
You mentioned tur dal, urad dal, I think the same thing.
Right.
Urad dal up about 1.7%, 1.7 times, I'm sorry, up about 1.7 times between last year and this year. That's almost double.
Right.
Arhar dal up about 20% between last year and this year. Ginger prices up about 20% between last year and this year.
Right.
Moong dal, another essential dal that goes into every average Indian's dietary requirements, is up about 60%. 1.6x is the price between last year and this year. Now let's look at the more critical. Tomatoes, I want to come towards the end, right? Tomatoes is something that we have done enough of. But rice, remember, we stopped banning, we put a ban on exporting non-basmati rice. So rice prices have actually between last year and June this year gone up 260%. 2.6x has been the kind of price rise we have seen on rice. Wheat, okay, not too much, just about 8% or so. Potato also just about 10%. But tomatoes up five times. 500%. I mean, what sort of a plate is this, and what does this tell us about the health
it didn't even leave ginger alone, Kartik. Ginger. This 1.2x, I'm actually doubtful, because there was a time in between when ginger prices were trading in multiples more than tomato.
Yeah.
I remember getting
I think you must be talking about July. These are June prices.
Correct.
So this is June to June last year to this
Yeah,
year.
if you check July prices, the transmission, you will know. Because I'm not kidding, 200 grams of ginger was for $250 or $300 or something like that, So no spice, no tomatoes, no tang. You have got to do at the lowest is potato, which means add a little salt to that potato and get some arhar dal and add some turmeric to that, and that's all you can have.
Right.
But
this is all year to year. I'm saying tomato, potato and onion, not part of this thali, but onion together up almost 87% month on month, not year on year, between June and July. So the large question still is, I don't think with the, MPC also commencing today, going to continue for the next 72 hours or so, will it really be able to do anything at all to tame food inflation? Unfortunately, I think the answer is no.
Oh, difficult. Gaurang, that's a question that's not just for today, that's for eternity. How does a central bank, which is working so hard to keep inflation at manageable levels, lose it completely because of a factor of which it has no control over, like food inflation?
So that's where the government policies come into place, Krishna Kumar. The government has been focusing over the last many years and encouraging the farmers with new technologies and educating farmers how to get the best output and more output from their field, be it with respect to more crop per drop or be it with respect to utilization of urea and fertilizer. And fortunately, Krishna Kumar, in India, we have a land which is absolutely fertile. Unfortunately, we are extremely dependent on the monsoon season because of the fact that you have a population of 140 crores and large part of that population depends upon the agri activity. So we have to possibly, reinforce ourselves with respect to conserving water, rainwater harvest, and create more kind of reservoirs and educate our farmers not to leave the activity that they are into and come in search of labor job, etc. in metros and tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think if we are able to secure this particular, environment with relation to agri inflation, then we may be in a better place. But unfortunately, we have spent a lot of years not doing that. I hope that we'll possibly concentrate on this. But yeah, till that happens, we might have to fight this agri-food inflation to a great extent.
And do you expect this agri-food inflation trouble to affect the Indian economy for the next month or so? Because what we understand is that tomato shortage is not going to go away. Tomato sowing has been low. Urad dal, same problem. Not enough supply. That's the reason why these prices are going up. And you can't freshly sow tomatoes today to take away the lack of supply.
Yeah, what I heard on the street was that because the tomatoes are so expensive, people have switched on to curds. They are mixing curds with their dal, not the tomatoes, to get that little sour taste. And this was on a lighter note. But yeah, I mean, it may trouble. But remains to be seen, Krishna Kumar, as to how elevated the prices stay and whether the government, and like they possibly bring in a lot of restriction in terms of exports. We may have possibly a better situation. But till that time, I think it will be a struggle.
Oh, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle to get that food inflation back. Gaurang, I want to thank you now for taking time out this morning and putting so many things into perspective. Straight from the markets have opened to the US Fed to RBI to tomatoes, helping us understand Thalinomics better. Gaurang, thank you so much for taking time out and hope to see you again here on Business Plus on News 9 Live. Kartik, fascinating, isn't it? The fact of the matter is that we can keep talking. Tomato prices are not going to come down anytime soon. Ginger prices are not going to come down anytime soon. Food prices, thali prices are not going to come down. The only thought I have at this point in time as we discuss stocks and mutual funds is the people on right just above the poverty line or before who are going to be the most affected because the fact that their thali, they cannot complete their thali because it's so expensive. Here's hoping that, for their sake, there's more sanity in food prices and more sanity when it comes to bringing down food inflation. But I'm afraid we're going to move away from that. Any final thoughts on RBI per se?
Krishna, I feel, RBI is walking a very, very tight rope.
Yep.
Food inflation is something it can do little to nothing about, absolutely. But it's walking a very thin, fine rope, and it has to, and a tight rope at that, and it has to sort of, try and decide what is more important for India's overall economic growth.
Yep.
Do we need more capital inflow into India? And if that is the case, then perhaps keeping a pause on rates or maybe taking that punt eventually of cutting rates is something it will have to do to attract capital coming into India. Or in election year is inflation, and I'm talking about core inflation here, not the food inflation, which actually impacts the Aam Aadmi, like you mentioned, the just about poverty line or getting into the above poverty line scenario. Food inflation is what bites them.
Right.
And food inflation is something that the monetary policy tightening cannot control. So should you try to hammer down headline inflation, should you try to hammer down core inflation by increasing rates at the cost of foreign capital coming into India? So I think that is the tightrope that RBI has to walk in the next 3 days, and it has to decide, is it on the side of politics in election year or is it on the side of long-term economic growth? One
hell of a juggling act that is going to be, as Gaurang was mentioning, all the state elections coming up and the build-up to that all-important central election. A lot will certainly play in the minds of those who are making policies, are deciding things for the country.